The final words I ever heard my wife speak with any affection, even manufactured affection, were whispered over the phone to her mother. I was standing just outside the open patio door, covered in a fine layer of white oak sawdust, holding a small, clumsily wrapped box containing a pair of earrings she'd pointed out weeks ago. I had come home early to surprise her. The surprise, it turned out, was mine. "He's just so simple, Mom," she'd said, a little laugh catching in her throat. "He comes home smelling of wood and sweat, and he thinks building this house with his bare hands is some grand romantic gesture. It's just a house." There was a pause. I could hear the faint, tinny voice of her mother, Sheila, on the other end. Then Clara's voice dropped, turning harder, colder. "Don't you worry. Julian's attorneys are already looking at everything. The business, the land, all of it. By the time I'm done with him, he won't even have a roof over his head. My name is Leo Petrov. I'm 42 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been a custom carpenter and home builder. It's not a glamorous job. It's a profession of calluses and aching backs, of splinters you dig out with a utility knife by the light of a truck's dashboard. But it's an honest one. You take a piece of raw land and a stack of lumber, and you create something solid, something real. Something that provides shelter and warmth. A home. I believed in the simple integrity of that equation. I thought my wife, Clara, did too. I thought the home I was building for U.S., board by painstaking board, was the physical manifestation of our shared future. But I was wrong. Let me start from the beginning. We met 10 years ago. I was framing a house in a new development, and she was a real estate agent showing the property next door. She had this bright, ambitious energy that seemed to light up everything around her. I was quiet, steady. We were opposites, and for a long time that felt like our strength. I grounded her, and she pushed me. We married 2 years later. Her parents, especially her mother, Sheila, were polite but never truly approving. They came from money, old money that had dwindled but left behind a potent sense of entitlement. I was a tradesman. In their eyes, I was a temporary solution, not a permanent fixture in their daughter's grand life plan. For years, things were good. Or I should say, they were stable. I ran my own small business, Petrov Custom Homes. It was just me and a couple of guys I trusted. We didn't build sprawling mansions for the ultra-rich. We built solid, beautiful homes for families. I took pride in my work. Every joint was perfect. Every finish was flawless. I poured my soul into the grain of the wood. Clara's career, meanwhile, was taking off. She was good at her job, charismatic and ruthless in negotiations. She started selling high-end properties, mingling with developers and financiers. Her world became one of catered open houses and champagne closings, while mine remained one of sawdust and nail guns. The shift was subtle at first. She started making little comments. "Don't you ever want to do more, Leo? To scale up? We could be living in one of those houses, not just building them for other people." She'd wrinkle her nose when I came home, gesturing at my work boots. "Leave those on the porch, honey. You're tracking the whole job site in here. The shared dream we once had, a simple life in a home we built together, began to feel like my dream alone. Hers was being replaced by something shinier, something with more square footage and a better zip code. 2 years ago, my grandfather passed away. He left me a 5-acre plot of land out in the countryside, a beautiful piece of rolling hills and old-growth oak trees. It was the land he'd always planned to build on himself but never got around to. For me, it was a sign. This was it. This was where I would build our forever home. I showed the deed to Clara, my heart pounding with excitement. "We can finally do it," I told her. Just like we always talked about, she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's a bit far out, isn't it? And what about the cost? Building from scratch is so expensive. My company will handle the build," I explained, my pride swelling. "I'll do most of the work myself after hours and on weekends. It'll be my labor, our love. It won't cost us nearly as much as you think." I had already done the math. My business, which I had structured as an LLC years ago on the advice of my friend Mark, would purchase the materials. It was a legitimate business expense, a showcase home, and the land was mine, free and clear. It was perfect. Her enthusiasm seemed to grow as the foundation was poured and the walls went up. She started talking about interior designers and landscape architects. Her vision for the house was far grander than mine. I wanted handcrafted cabinets and a big stone fireplace. She wanted imported marble and a swimming pool with a grotto. We argued, but I usually relented. I told myself it was her house too. I wanted her to be happy. I loved her, and my love was a quiet, sturdy thing, built to withstand pressure. I thought, the past 6 months, she had become more distant than ever. She was always out for client dinners or networking events. The credit card bills started to climb. Expensive dresses, spa treatments, dinners at restaurants I could never afford. When I tried to talk to her about it, she'd get defensive. I have to look a certain way for my job, Leo. You wouldn't understand. This is how deals are made. The man she was making deals with, I would soon learn, was Julian Croft. He was a slick commercial real estate developer, the kind of man who wore $3,000 suits and a predatory smile. I'd seen him in photos from industry events Clara had on her social media. She always stood a little too close to him. And that brought me to the patio door, with a gift in my hand and a gut full of ice. Her words echoed in the quiet air. By the time I'm done with him, he won't even have a roof over his head. It wasn't just about the affair. That was a simple, common betrayal. This was different. This was a calculated demolition. She wasn't just leaving me. She was planning to strip mine my entire life, take the very thing I was building for us, and leave me with nothing but the dust. I didn't storm inside. I didn't confront her. The anger I should have felt was replaced by a profound and terrifying clarity. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. You see the stress fractures appear, you hear the groan of the support beams, and then, in an instant, the whole structure gives way. My marriage, my future, the woman I loved. It was all rubble at my feet. I backed away from the door silently. My worn leather boots made no sound on the grass. I walked to my truck, placed the unopened gift box on the passenger seat, and drove away. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields. I finally pulled over on a deserted country road overlooking a valley. I sat there for an hour, maybe 2, as the sky turned from orange to purple to black. The engine ticked as it cooled. In the silence of the cab, I thought about her words. The roof. She saw it as a prize, a physical asset to be claimed in a divorce. She didn't understand what it meant to me. A roof wasn't just shingles and trusses. It was shelter. It was security. It was the culmination of a lifetime of hard work. It was the promise a man makes to his family. I will keep you safe. And she was going to take it, not because she needed it, but as an act of conquest. To prove she had won. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone. There was only one person I could call. Mark Jensen. We'd been friends since we were kids, building forts in the woods behind my grandfather's house. He was now a corporate lawyer, sharp as a tack and utterly pragmatic. He answered on the second ring. Leo? Everything okay? It's late. I took a deep breath. My voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. Mark, I need your help. I need a lawyer. I told him everything. I repeated Clara's words verbatim. He listened without interrupting, a skill that made him a formidable attorney. When I finished, the silence on the line stretched for a long moment. Okay, he said finally, his voice calm and steady. It was the voice of a man assessing a complex problem, breaking it down into manageable parts. First thing, Leo, do not go home. Do not talk to her. Do not let her know you know anything. Is there somewhere you can stay tonight? The site, I said. There's a small trailer there. I sleep in it sometimes when I work late. Good. Go there. Lock the door. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, you will be at my office. And Leo, he paused, his tone hardening slightly. From this moment on, you do not make a single decision based on emotion. You do not yell, you do not plead, you do not argue. You are no longer a husband. You are a client. We are going to be methodical. We are going to be strategic. And we are going to be silent. Is that understood? Understood, I said. The word felt solid in my mouth. It was the first solid thing I'd felt in hours. That night, in the cramped, cold trailer on the construction site of my own home, a new plan began to form. Clara wanted to take my roof. Fine. I would keep building it. I would make it the most beautiful, solid roof she had ever seen. And I would make sure she never, ever spent a single night under it. The turning point wasn't a moment of anger, but one of cold resolve. She had mistaken my quiet nature for weakness. She had mistaken my devotion for stupidity. These were profound and soon-to-be very costly miscalculations. The next morning, I was in Mark's office at 7:45, a thermos of black coffee in my hand. The office was on the 30th floor of a downtown skyscraper, a world of glass and steel that felt alien to me. Mark's space was minimalist and immaculate. He sat behind a large mahogany desk, looking over a notepad. "All right," he began, forgoing any pleasantries. "Let's inventory. The land the house is on. Tell me about the deed." "It was my grandfather's. He left it to me in his will. My name is the only one on it. We were married when I inherited it, but I never added her." Mark made a note. "Good. That's very good. In this state, an inheritance, if kept separate, is not considered a marital asset. The house itself, however, is being built during the marriage. That's the marital asset. That's what she'll come for." I leaned forward. "About that, my company, Petrov Custom Homes LLC, is technically the builder. I've been running all the material purchases, the permits, the subcontractor payments, everything, through the business accounts." Mark stopped writing and looked up at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Leo, you beautiful, simple carpenter. You incorporated 10 years ago on my advice. You've kept clean books, I assume." "Meticulously," I said. "Every receipt, every invoice. So the LLC owns the materials. The LLC is paying for the labor. The house is, for all intents and purposes, a spec home being built by your company on land you personally own." He tapped his pen on the desk. "This changes things. Complicates her claim significantly. It doesn't eliminate it, but it gives us a powerful negotiating position. She thinks she's taking half of a home. We're going to argue she's entitled to half the increase in value of an LLC, which is much harder to prove and liquidate." "What's next?" I asked. "Next, we gather irrefutable proof of her intent," he said. "Her plan to defraud you is called dissipation of marital assets. We need to prove she's been spending marital funds on her affair. We need to prove her bad faith. You go back. You play the part of the tired, devoted husband. You say nothing. You just watch. And you document." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It had a list, a voice-activated audio recorder, a GPS tracker for her car. He told me how to check our shared cloud accounts for synced text messages and photos. "She's arrogant, Leo. Arrogant people get sloppy. We're going to let her bury herself." I walked out of that office with a clear mission. The hurt was still there, a cold, heavy stone in my chest. But now it was surrounded by a framework of purpose. I was no longer a victim. I was a builder, and this was just a new kind of project. The materials weren't wood and nails. They were data and evidence. The goal wasn't to build a home, but to dismantle a lie. That afternoon I went home. Clara was there, sipping a glass of white wine in the kitchen. She looked up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Where were you last night? I called you." "Sorry," I said, my voice even. "Fell asleep in the trailer at the site." Exhausted, she seemed to accept this. My exhaustion was a familiar part of our life now. "Well, you need to be here more, Leo. Sheila and I are meeting with a designer tomorrow to talk about the kitchen. You should be there. I can't. I have to finish the subflooring upstairs," I said. "Just pick what you like. I trust your taste." A pleased smile touched her lips. This was what she wanted. A blank check and an absentee husband. "Okay, honey. I'll handle it." That night, while she slept, I did as Mark instructed. I placed a tiny digital recorder, no bigger than a sugar cube, under the lip of the kitchen island. I put another in the living room, tucked behind a photo frame. The GPS tracker was magnetic. It took me less than 30 seconds to attach it to the underside of her car. Finally, I logged into our family cloud account on my laptop. It was all there. Years of photos, documents, and, most importantly, fully synced message threads from her phone. She had never bothered to turn it off. Reading those messages was like drinking poison. The flirty texts with Julian. The plans for secret weekend trips. The cruel, mocking messages she exchanged with her mother about me. He's out there playing with his little hammer while I'm planning my real future. Sheila's replies were always encouraging. You deserve a man who can give you the world, my darling. Not just build you a house in the middle of nowhere. I didn't read them all. I didn't need to. I just needed to confirm the pattern. I took screenshots, saved them to an encrypted hard drive, and logged out. I felt nothing. It was just data, just evidence. The next few months were a strange, hollow performance. I worked on the house with a singular focus. I put in 16-hour days, my body aching but my mind clear. The physical labor was a relief. It was honest. The wood didn't lie. Perfect cut was a perfect cut. A level floor was level. The house grew around me, a testament to my skill. The cedar siding went up, the copper gutters were installed, the slate roof was laid tile by tile. It was becoming a masterpiece. Meanwhile, Clara was living a completely separate life. The GPS tracker showed her car parked overnight at a downtown condo building 2 or 3 times a week. Julian's, I presumed. The credit card statements were a litany of her deception. Hotel rooms in the city, expensive dinners for 2, jewelry from boutiques I'd never heard of. I documented it all in a spreadsheet, cross-referencing dates and times with the GPS data and the text messages. A cold, irrefutable timeline of her betrayal. The audio recorders picked up her phone calls. I'd listened to them at night in the trailer, my face impassive. I heard her telling Julian she loved him. I heard her reassuring her mother that the divorce would be a slam dunk, and that she'd have the house and plenty of money to tide her over until she and Julian were officially together. Leo's too simple to fight me, she said in one call. He'll just roll over. He always does. She visited the house site on weekends, walking through the rooms with a proprietary air. The marble for the master bath came in, she'd announce. It's exquisite. And the designer thinks we should have a 6-foot chandelier in the foyer. Whatever you think is best. I'd say, not looking up from my work. My passivity emboldened her. She saw my quiet compliance not as a strategy, but as a confirmation of her own superiority. I was the simple carpenter, and she was the master architect of our lives, and soon of my ruin. She had no idea that while she was picking out chandeliers, I was building a case against her as solid and unyielding as the foundation I had poured with my own hands. She was so focused on the roof she was going to take from me that she never thought to look at the ground she was standing on. It was about to give way. The house was nearly done. The floors were stained, the walls were painted, and the custom cabinetry I'd spent weeks crafting was installed in the kitchen. It was beautiful. It was a home any family would dream of, and it felt like a tomb. One evening, a new charge appeared on the credit card statement I checked daily. $52,000. From a high-end jewelry store downtown. It was a single, breathtakingly arrogant purchase. Mark had told me to wait for a moment like this, a clear and egregious act of financial dissipation that could not be explained away. This was it. I called Clara. Can we have dinner tonight? I asked, my voice calm. There's a little Italian place we used to go to. I'd like to talk. She sounded surprised, but agreed. She probably thought I was going to make some pathetic, emotional plea for her to come home more often. We sat in a small booth in the corner of the dimly lit restaurant. The air smelled of garlic and old wine. It was where I had first told her I loved her. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. We made small talk for a few minutes. She talked about a big sale she was about to close. I talked about the final trim work on the house. Then, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded copy of the credit card statement. I slid it across the table. There's a charge on here I don't recognize, I said simply, tapping my finger on the $52,000 line item. From Cartier. I didn't buy you this. The color drained from her face. It was the first time in months I had seen the mask of cool confidence slip. Her eyes darted around the restaurant, as if looking for an escape route. It's a business expense, she stammered. A closing gift for a very important client. $52,000 for a client gift? I asked, my voice still level. Who was the client, Clara? She couldn't answer. Her jaw worked, but no sound came out. She just stared at the piece of paper as if it were a snake. I had finally shown a single card from my hand, and it had completely unnerved her. I didn't press the issue. I just folded the paper, put it back in my pocket, and said, "The check's on me." We finished the meal in suffocating silence. A week later, the external catalyst Mark had predicted arrived. I was on the site when I got a news alert on my phone. Prominent developer Julian Croft arrested in massive real estate fraud scheme. His assets were frozen. His company was under federal investigation, and his face was plastered all over the news. The shiny future Clara had been banking on had just evaporated. Her frantic calls started that evening. I didn't answer. She left a string of increasingly desperate voicemails. The next day, she showed up at the construction site. Her face was pale and tear-streaked. Her expensive clothes looked rumpled. She ran to me, throwing her arms around me. I stood perfectly still, unmoving. "Leo, oh Leo, I've made a terrible mistake," she sobbed into my chest. "I was so stupid. I got caught up in that world, and it meant nothing. He meant nothing. It's you I love. It's always been you. Can you ever forgive me? We have this beautiful home, this new start. We can make it work. Please." It was a masterful performance. The desperate plea, the tears, the appeal to our shared history and the future I had built for us. A year ago, it would have broken my heart. Now it was just noise. I gently removed her arms from around my neck and took a step back. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in a long time. I didn't see the woman I had married. I saw a stranger, a panic strategist whose plan had just blown up in her face. "It's too late for that, Clara," I said. My voice was not angry or sad. It was just final. I turned and walked back into the house, leaving her standing alone in the driveway, the dust settling around her. The next time we would speak, it would be in a lawyer's office. The performance was over. The accounting was about to begin. The mediation was scheduled for 2 weeks later in a sterile conference room at Mark's firm. I arrived with Mark, dressed in a simple, clean suit that felt like a costume. I was a man of flannel and denim, not wool and silk. Clara was already there, seated on the opposite side of a long, polished table. She had her own lawyer, a bulldog of a man named Henderson, and for moral support, her mother, Sheila. Clara looked composed, her face a mask of wronged virtue. Sheila, however, glared at me with pure venom. "Let's begin," Mark said, his voice filling the quiet room. "Mr. Henderson, my client is prepared to offer your client a fair and equitable dissolution of the marriage." Henderson smirked. "Fair and equitable, of course. We'll start with the house. An independent appraiser has valued the property at $2.4 million. We expect our 50% share. Then there's the business, Petrov Custom Homes. We'll require a full forensic accounting and 50% of its value. And of course, significant alimony. Given the disparity in income and the lifestyle to which my client has become accustomed." Clara sat there, nodding along, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She thought this was a simple negotiation. She thought she held all the cards. Mark listened patiently until Henderson was finished. Then he opened a thick binder on the table in front of him. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Now, let's discuss the reality of the situation." He started by sliding a series of glossy photographs across the table. They were taken from my phone, showing the GPS tracker's data overlaid on a map of the city. Little red dots showing Clara's car parked for nights on end outside Julian Croft's condominium. "For the past 8 months," Mark began, his tone matter-of-fact, "your client has been engaged in an adulterous affair with Mr. Julian Croft. While adultery itself may not directly affect the financial settlement in this state, the dissipation of marital assets during that affair most certainly does." He then produced the credit card statements. highlighting tens of thousands of dollars in charges for hotels, lavish dinners, flights, and gifts. He finished with the $52,000 receipt from Cartier. A client gift, I believe, was the explanation, Mark said, glancing at Clara. Her face had gone rigid. This is an invasion of privacy. Henderson blustered. This is irrelevant. Is it? Mark countered, and from his briefcase, he pulled a small digital audio player. He pressed play. Clara's voice filled the room, clear as day. It was from a call I had recorded weeks ago, a call she'd made to her mother from our kitchen. He's just so simple, Mom. He thinks building this house with his bare hands is some grand romantic gesture. Don't you worry. Julian's attorneys are already looking at everything. The business, the land, all of it. By the time I'm done with him, he won't even have a roof over his head. Mark pressed stop. The silence in the room was absolute. Clara was as white as a sheet. Her mother, Sheila, looked as if she'd been struck. Henderson's jaw was slack. They had heard it, the raw, unvarnished truth of her intent. The plot to leave me homeless, spoken in her own cheerful, confident voice. That, Mark said quietly, is a recording of your client conspiring to commit marital fraud. It demonstrates clear and malicious intent. But frankly, it's all secondary to the main point. This was the moment. The unveiling. Mark slid a new set of documents across the table. This is the deed to the 5-acre property on which the house is built. As you can see, it is solely in the name of Leo Petrov, inherited from his grandfather. As per state law, it is his sole and separate property, not a marital asset. Henderson snatched the paper, his eyes scanning it furiously. The land, perhaps, but the house, the $2.4 million improvement on that land, was built during the marriage. That is a marital asset, and we will have our half. He almost shouted, trying to regain control. I'm afraid not, Mark said, his voice still perfectly calm. He produced the final, thickest stack of papers. These are the articles of incorporation for Petrov Custom Homes, LLC, founded 6 years prior to the marriage. And these, he said, gesturing to the stack, are the financial records for the construction of the house. Every permit, every material invoice from lumber to nails to the last box of screws, every subcontractor's check, was paid for by the LLC. The house was not built by Leo Petrov, the husband. It was constructed by Petrov Custom Homes, LLC, the corporation, as a speculative building project. He let that sink in. I watched Clara's face as the gears turned, as the horrifying implications of what Mark was saying began to dawn on her. The house you are claiming is not a marital home, Mark concluded, his voice like a judge's gavel. It is, and always has been, a corporate asset, built on my client's private, non-marital land. Your client has no legal claim to it. None whatsoever. The collapse was instantaneous and total. Clara stared at Mark, then at her own lawyer, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. All the arrogance, all the confidence, was gone, replaced by a raw, naked panic. Sheila was the first to find her voice. You tricked her, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. You planned this all along. You sneaky, worthless man. You deceived my daughter. I met her gaze. For the first time in the entire meeting, I spoke. No, I said, my voice low and steady. I didn't deceive her. I just listened to her. She told me exactly what she was going to do. I just chose to believe her. My words seemed to finally break Clara. A terrible, guttural sob escaped her lips. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, the house, our house. It was never your house, Clara, I said softly. Henderson, looking utterly defeated, cleared his throat. There is still the matter of the business itself. Of course, Mark said, sliding one final sheet of paper over. This is our settlement offer. My client agrees to waive any claim to the significant credit card debt your client has accrued in her name. He will not pursue her for dissipation of assets. In exchange, she will walk away with her personal belongings and nothing else. There will be no alimony. There will be no claim on the business. This is a one-time, final offer. If you refuse, we will see you in court, and we will present all of this evidence to a judge. Including the audio recording, Clara finally broke down completely, burying her face in her hands, her body shaking with violent sobs. Her entire world, the one she had so carefully constructed at my expense, had been demolished in the space of 10 minutes. She had nothing. Julian was gone. The money was gone. And now, the house she had betrayed me for was gone too. She had been left with nothing but the consequences of her own greed. I stood up. Mark stood with me. I looked across the table one last time at the woman who had shared my bed for 8 years. She looked small and broken. I felt no triumph, no joy, just a deep, quiet emptiness. A sense of finality. The project was complete. I walked out of that room without looking back. I left her there with her mother, her lawyer, and the ruins of her life. I didn't need to hear the outcome. I already knew it. She would sign the papers. She had no other choice. The next day I went to the house. The air was crisp and cool, and the afternoon sun slanted through the tall oak trees, casting long shadows on the lawn. I walked through the rooms. The imported marble in the bathroom felt cold and foreign. The space for a 6-foot chandelier in the foyer looked absurdly large. This wasn't my home. This was the monument to a lie. Over the next few months, I worked with a realtor, not from Clara's agency, and sold the house. It sold quickly to a young family with 2 kids. They loved the craftsmanship, the solid feel of it. They didn't see a monument. They just saw a home. I used the profits, which all went to my LLC, to buy back the plot of land next to it, the one my grandfather had always said had the better view. I started again. This time I built a smaller house. It was modest with a simple, clean design. It had a big stone fireplace, handcrafted cabinets made of warm cherry wood, and a wide porch that faced the sunset. There was no marble, no grotto, no cavernous foyer. Every piece of it was something I wanted, something that felt real and true. One evening last week, I finished my final project for the new house. It was a simple rocking chair, made from a piece of oak harvested from my own land. The grain was deep and honest. I carried it out to the new porch and set it down. I sat in that chair, feeling the smooth, worn wood under my hands, and I watched the sun dip below the hills. The sky turned a brilliant orange, then a soft, dusky purple. A profound sense of peace settled over me. Clara had vowed that by the time she was done, I wouldn't even have a roof over my head. And in a way, she was right. I didn't have that roof. I had a different one, a better one. One I had built not for a lie but for myself. She never understood that a home isn't just a structure to be owned or a prize to be won. It's a foundation of integrity. And my foundation, I realized as darkness settled over the quiet hills, was stronger than it had ever been.